Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another provision conversation. Today, I have my friend Ron Lynch. Ron, thanks so much for joining. I'm excited to discuss today with you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And as I was sharing with you before, and this will be like a little bit of my introduction to my audience, for those who don't know Ron. So as I've been opening up the door to bring in men to have the conversation around provision with, I've been finding a little bit of a challenge of the man who really exhibits this as a way of being in his life, and just like the energy that I receive from him, or the energy that he puts out into the world, and that he lives what he teaches. And Ron, you came to my mind pretty immediately when that was prevalent to me, because the little bit I have been able to connect with you, but in what I see on the internet is like I mean, literally and metaphorically and spiritually, it's like a man who's getting his hands in the dirt is a man who I see as like really knows what it means to live in provision. And so Ron, I know you're great for many reasons of who you've been in your lifetime, but one that I greatly respect you for is the way you value family, and the way you like are really leaving a legacy of what it means to be a man of God. And so I really look forward to having this conversation with you. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thanks for those kind words. I will continue to try to live up to those.
Yeah.
That's a daily, that's a daily thing. It's a practice.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, on that note, Ron, what we I guess we can just jump right in and get started with is, what would you say are the, and it can be whatever first comes to mind, but like the biggest discrepancies right now in what we experience in life, you know, like you living as a man and as a father, and even your grandfather as well, right?
Not yet.
Oh, you're
I,
not? Why did I think you had a
I look like
grandchild?
one, but not yet. No, I
No,
think
you don't look like one. I swear though, I thought your daughter had a baby, but okay, maybe not. Just prophesying into the future. But as a father, um, what would you say are the biggest discrepancies for who a man really is at his core nature, and who he might think he needs to be?
so that's a great question. I'm probably have to go a little deep and a little wide on it because it's you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
understand the development of a man and how and what they're taught to even get your hands around the idea. And we have a lot of lore in our country, a lot of stories that were told as kids. Peter Pan needs to grow up. Pinocchio needs to not tell lies to grow up. We have all these fables where we have juvenile adolescent boys that are on a quest. King Arthur, these Prince Valiant, and then they grow up and they become these princes magically, and then somehow they turn into kings one day. And so I was myself was kind of on that thought pattern of, oh, I'm a slave, then I'm going to be a field hand, then I'm going to be a field owner, then I'm going to be a knight, then a prince, then a king, and kind of along the Alison Armstrong idea of how men, the amazing development of men and all of that. And I know Alison quite well. And
Mm.
along the way, I realized I was none of those things. I was actually on the wizard path. I was on
Mm.
the path of words, and the wizard path leading to magi for me, which is a wizard that's connected to God. So that's not exactly what I thought I was going to grow up to be. I didn't even know that was a choice, and I turned around and I was that, and didn't.
Mm.
I self-identify at a much older age of, oh, no wonder I'm a kingmaker in business, but I've never been an emperor, and I was like, where's this gap? But we train young men, and are culturally to want physical manifestations of manliness. So it is wealth, it is power, it is respect, it is command, it's even this word legacy. And I think that part of getting there is actually abandoning that thinking altogether.
Mm.
Um, and it's service. And it starts with service, actually. Because the ultimate value in life is not money. money is a byproduct of value created. So you can't obtain wealth without stealing it or doing something nefarious or talking people out of their money, which is what most men are taught to do in our culture, is how to obtain wealth is talk people into giving you their money and try to do it ethically, but it doesn't really matter if you do. And then there's this other path of go out and provide something of such great value, people must give you their money because they can't wait to be involved in your business or in work with you. And then they in turn share that, and your, for lack of a better word, kingdom and legacy grow out of actually providing value to the community around you. Now, when we go back to tribal times, that's kind of how the financial hierarchy actually started, because in a tribe you have hunters and gatherers, which are men and women, but then there's all of these people that work less than the hunters and the farmers that have more status, power, and wealth, which are the medicine men, the religious men, the chiefs, the generals, the people who graduated through these systems. And those people are reliant upon knowledge and wisdom and value creation. Like the medicine man is healing and saving lives, therefore we make sure there's only one of those in the tribe with that knowledge. We keep them alive. They live very well. And that translated into the modern day doctor. So you can see these translate from doctor to lawyer to politician. All of those tribal things went forward. And the same went for females. But here in the last 40 years, 100 years, we've gone, no, women need to be hunters and doctors, and they have a right to be those other things, which in modern society is true. They do. It's just, it was not a natural fit, only based upon the fact that it hadn't been that way before. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying it just wasn't ever done that way. It was very rare. So they had these nurturing jobs that turned into nursing and secretarial and all of these other home ec type jobs. And the word housewife came about. And we had a culture that wanted to tax people. So suddenly a female workforce became super valuable. So it became really important from a taxation and political level to kind of destroy the nuclear family, so it were, the Americana family, and create division amongst races and people. So we end up with a whole bunch of worker bees that spend their time trying to earn money for the hive to give the money back to the government. And we ended up in a place where we pay 55% of our daily income to the government through a variety of taxes. And then they want to tax us when we die. And then we all have $258,000 of national debt on top of our heads. So we end up not being people. We end up being slaves. And we never make it from the field to the land, like to the very first two steps I talked about. So I think there's unfortunately an engineered piece to this that's political. There's a church-driven piece to this, and there's a cultural piece to this. So when I look to the Lord and I look to Christ, I go, okay, Christ was initiated by these three magi from the East. That's the career I work in. And they anointed him over gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which are the symbols. Gold represents the government. Government issues coins. Frankincense represents the church. It's the incense that we burn to drive evil spirits out before the word is read, represents the church. And myrrh represents the culture, which is a spice that we put on dead bodies so they don't stink. So we claimed this Lord as king of death and king of all of these governances, the Lord over state, church, and culture in Christianity. And we have this king of kings above it. So that's a completely different paradigm and lens to look at the world.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting you to go in that direction, but I mean, inevitably it makes sense that you would, knowing what you know about these different dynamics of where things are now, because these layers are deep. They're
They're
deep.
very deep. And we're at a very interesting cultural crossroads between technology and humanity, where our society is developed and technology is developed to a place where we're about to collide with literal digital slavery or
Mm,
the traditional freedom, which is why I sold everything and I bought a piece of farmland and I live out in the middle of nowhere and we literally are growing our own garden and we have
mm.
rabbits and chickens and deer and we're living like Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, I love seeing your little house on the prairie life. It's really beautiful. And well, and it makes me curious. So okay, with all of that being said, I think the common question is, and I don't know how deep most people would go in this, but to you, Ron, what would you say is like then the way forward? Like if we're talking about, realizing where things started as far back as we can go with what knowledge we have and where we are now, um, as like for those driven by family and those driven to live a life of truth, like what is that path forward, at least in your awareness?
So you and I have a common friend, Jesse Elder, and Jesse asked a really good question. When you run into information, is it useful?
Mhm.
So when I look at that for me, I say, are you useful? Am I useful? And that is a core competency question for me. And I think that it begins there, that we have taught people to not be useful. We've taught them to be conformed through an education to rely 100% on technology for everything. And so
Mhm.
they specialize and they're good at one thing, and that's how they earn their living. Well, that's how you capture a worker or a slave. So I think that the first thing is looking at being a utility player in your own life. You need to
Mhm.
learn language. You need to learn conversation. You need to learn the idea of business and barter. Once upon a time,
Harder. Yeah.
business and barter was, I mean, right, was
Yeah.
the thing. When we need to understand that. You need to know how to cook. You need to know how to grow a plant. You need to not be afraid to go pick up a chicken.
Hmm.
It's learning multiple skills. And this goes back to like my hero is Leonardo da Vinci. And the thing about da Vinci was he a painter? Was he a sculptor? Was he an inventor? Was he an expert in anatomy? Did he understand mathematics? Did he understand law, politics, and religion? Yes.
Hmm.
He was a master. Masters don't become masters from learning one thing. Rodin was a master because he understood sculpture and paint. And like
Hmm.
mastery has to do with multiple disciplines and how they cross pollinate for not just for your survival, but for thriving. And you don't want to be a person that survives. You want to be a person that thrives. So if you're going to thrive, you have to have relative expertise in a number of different disciplines. And then suddenly you're useful.
Hmm.
And then when you have a family, you teach them to have multiple useful utilities. So all of my kids know how to cook. All of them know how to swing a hammer and build a deck. All of them work on cars. All of them, like they do that they know how to make movies. They know like all the stuff that our family industry is being good at being a human being in
Hmm.
multiple verticals.
Hmm.
And at the core there, that's where happiness comes from, is um, an ability to have self-reliance and competency in a number of areas. Because if you do, that also lowers your thresholds of fear and stress.
Hmm.
I'm not worried about what will happen because I can deal with it.
Hmm.
I can build a fire and I can build a structure. I
Hmm.
can build a meal and I can go get the medicine. And it's when we start stripping away people of core competencies and say you can only be one thing, you must be a programmer. Do you program cobalt or do you program? And
Yeah.
you're familiar with those kind of questions, right? What do you program? Oh, what do you?
Yeah.
So I think speaking two languages is useful.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
something I'm learning to do, and I'm 57, and I'm just learning to speak Spanish now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting having a PD's family is Persian, and so I try to start learning Farsi so I can hear what they're saying when they talk Farsi. But so, I'm curious, Ron, so as you're talking about like having like a diverse skill set and being like useful and being able to utilize yourself, having been someone who has been, this is just something I'm curious about, being in like an entrepreneurial space and being immersed in many entrepreneurs. And you have been very successful in the marketing world. And when you were speaking about your children knowing how to cook and how to build a deck and also how to make a movie, how have you been able to, well, I mean, you were just speaking to it like cross-pollinating, but like, what I'm curious is how you've learned to master those ways of being in like a marketing world that in many ways doesn't really leave a lot of room for the more like the traditional family values and ways of being, like being very masterful and skilled in that sense of what you've done through many years of marketing and videography and all the things, while also staying immersed in a life where you've like bought a house on the farm and have land and animals. Like, how have you learned how to cross-pollinate the two? So
Well,
you will.
like I said, I started thinking I was going on that knight to prince to king path, and I didn't have any money. I was 13 years old and I had to get a job. So I got a job in a restaurant as a busboy. Then I learned how to cook. And then I got old enough to work in a legitimate place. And I went to a grocery store because I understood food a little bit and I understood customer service, but I was tired of going home stinking. You didn't stink when you worked at the grocery store. And so the grocery store turned into business management and at the same time selling food through a kiosk. But for fun, I wanted to make movies and I got the opportunity to act in my free time and weekends. And so I did that. Then the pivot came of putting that together and going, oh, if I did cooking demonstrations for customers, but on television, boom. That's where my career developed, was taking the first four things that I learned.
Oh, I love this.
And putting those together, and that turned into a career.
I love that.
Now that career doubled because I understood the P&L process and the business mechanics of being in management at the grocery store. So I understood management, I understood mechanics, I understood margin, customer flow, retail flow, where things came from, sourcing product. So that was a whole skill set that most people who produce television didn't have. So I had a distinct advantage over other people because I could get clients by talking to them about their business and how to make the business succeed, and pricing models and stuff that most advertisers don't understand. So it was the creative plus the business, put those together, and then that turned into sort of a powerhouse skill set that most people didn't have. So I started to stand out from my peers. So it's a collection of tools and it's incremental. Now, I will tell you that for the first 40 years of my life, I was pursuing money at the detriment of my family and my relationships. And I was as driven, I think is the word that we use and we admire so much. I was so driven. I was driven people away from me. Right?
Yeah.
And I was, and you confuse yourself, particularly as a man, by saying, I'm doing this for you, when the underlying principle is you're really doing it for yourself and your own ego because you don't want to be seen as a failure, and it's insecurity. And you use the word competition. Like, I don't use the word competition because that would require me to compare myself to other people now. And that's useless to me at this point in my life. So you start to peel these things off that are, I think, structurally important. You have to go through the phases. So if you're married to somebody or with somebody, you have to meet them where they are and understand they're going through a phase. And if you think you're maturing through your life, you have to understand that your partner is also maturing through their life, and they may not be at the place where they can be the perfect Viking father for your household or what. Like it's
Yeah.
just not a reality because you have to psychologically develop, and we grow,
Yeah.
develop and grow over time. So patience with myself, I did not have.
Hmm.
So guess what? I didn't have patience with the people around me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to learn that. And now those things started to kind of, I'll say, get their grip at 40 or 50. Like in that
Hmm.
40 to 50 years. I'm 57 now, I'll be 58 in a few weeks, but in that those years were very important for me to start shedding some of the beliefs and realizing, no, you're fine. And you're never going to be number one because there is no number one. You start meeting the people that consider themselves, or that the society considers themselves to be the number ones. And I've got to work with the business giants and the moguls and the movie stars and the politicians. And I've got to meet a ton of those people. And there's nobody that I had ever perceived that was in the position of number one who perceived themselves in that position in a healthy manner.
Hmm.
So the ones who thought they were number one were kind of jerks.
Hmm.
And the ones that thought they were number threes were actually pretty close to number ones. They were pretty good people. George Clooney's one of those people. Like, I disagree with 80% of his politics, but as a human being, he's a pretty great guy.
Hmm.
So I'm mature enough to go, hey, I can hold polarity. I can go, I don't like this guy's politics. I don't like because I think he's spoiled in these many ways, but I also think he's a terrific person in these many ways, and actually very humble and quite sweet. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure I would be that humble and sweet if I were Clooney,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear you share about your experience of like developing all the skills and being able to have like a lucrative career by someone, someone who's standing up. But then like it seems, and maybe this is just in my perception, but it seems like it's pretty common for a man to go down that path of driven and ambitious and building big, like which means building big with money. And then to one day be like, oh shit, like this isn't the full equation. There's something deeper here that I'm actually here to create. And then, that's when it really starts to expand, similar to what you were sharing there. I feel like that seems to be kind of what I hear as the path as a man's evolution.
And well, I think it also speaks to my age. I mean, the generation I grew up in, because my
Okay.
sons
Yeah.
are not this way. My
Yeah.
my sons are in a generation where the opportunity for financial success is not as ripe as it was for me. It
Mm.
was like it was a dog eat dog world, and you could get ahead and you could elbow your way to the top then financially, whatever, but you can't now. Like
Yeah.
it's like it's so difficult for young people to start and come out and go like, how could you afford a home?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like the mortgage interest rates and the cost of homes and the cost of food, like the cost of living is, I thought it was high when I was growing up, but had it been like, you can't get traction.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's so the great equivalency I see in there is these younger men have opened up their hearts at a much earlier age, and they're getting to the emotional maturity that we didn't get to in my generation. And I say in my parents' generation, I look at the baby boomers, and this might irritate some people, as being the most narcissistic generation ever. That they,
How come? I'm so
well,
curious about this.
the generation before them, the greatest generation, grew up with the Spanish flu, World War One, World War Two, the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, Korea. It was a shit show their
Mm.
entire lives. They start with 9 siblings and end up with 4. That there was poor was poor. People had dirt floors. There was no such thing as a television in your house. And
Mm.
here now, a poor person has a house with 3 televisions, and they have two maybe 3 cars.
Right.
Like how we measure poverty, we don't have the kind of poverty even globally that we used to. So
Right.
people that grew up in that, then they got back from World War II and they started having babies. So in the 46 to 64 is when these boomers were born. And they were raised without war. Vietnam was not that big. There were not that many people that went statistically, not like World War I or World War II. And their parents created an environment of comfort. That's when we kind of got the nuclear school and the station wagon and Disneyland, and they're literally named the Me generation.
Oh, never heard that.
And the Me generation became half of them became hippies, half of them became yuppies, some of them became hippies that turned into yuppies like Ben and Jerry.
Yeah.
And there was this generation that didn't really experience pain or hardship, and now they've started to inherit the greatest generation's homes, the real estate. And so they got the 401k, the retirement, maybe a pension, and their parents' real estate, and they have this wealth, and they don't mind telling you they earned it. And they didn't. And the young generation resents them. You can see that online and in the commentary of, kind of screw the boomers. We don't like these guys because because these people at the young end can't get a break. And these
Right.
guys get all the breaks, and they lack empathy. And I'll give you a little piece of evidence. It's very hard to find a boomer who allows himself to be called grandma or grandpa. Because they refuse to age. So they're Baba, they're Lou Baba, they're Dada, they're Papa, they all have nicknames.
Yeah.
They all had grandmas and grandpas. I had grandmas and grandpas, but that generation refuses to be allowed themselves to be called grandma and grandpa, or grandfather and grandmother,
Oh,
because
wow.
they're hooked on, they've been sold youth. And they look great. I will tell you, there are some 65 to 85-year-old people walking around this planet that is not what 65-year-old to 85-year-olds looked like when I was a little kid. These people look terrific. So they're what they're ultimately fighting is death.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even just aging they're fighting. It's a refusal to believe that they'll ever die. 20-year-olds in this world know they're going to die.
Yeah.
They have a reality of their mortality, and COVID brought that forward, and school shootings brought that forward. They have not only an understanding they're going to die, they have an expectation they're going to die. So you have a different mindset, which is, it's a big psychological disparity. And so these young folks, I think, are maturing emotionally at a rate that far faster than my generation. It took us a long time. We were latchkey kids. We raised ourselves. We didn't have any good counsel. We had two parents working that were boomers, and their focus of their life was them. And we were just kind of props in their lives. But we had kids that we adored, and we were like, we're not going to let our kids be props. And we kind of went overboard in our own way of, oh, we're going to go to soccer and everybody's going to get a juice box and a lunch and a trophy and that didn't occur when I was a kid. You went to soccer practice. That's all there was. And there was a soccer game, and that was it. There was no communal meal and no Suburbans, and none of that existed.
Yeah.
In fact, the parents didn't even show up 90% of the time. So it's like these kids grew up in that world, and they see that materialism, but no, it's not obtainable for them. So they're finding a spiritual reality that is grounded and truthful, along with this idea of mortality. And I am incredibly hopeful for the future, for these future generations. I think they're going to do a lot of healing and repairing from this really overextended materialism.
Yeah. I so appreciate your perspective on this, Ron. Wow, you're really expanding just the experience of this in that. Well, I want to hear you share a little bit more about that in that generation. And reminds me, I have to tell you, you shared something about a younger girl, and you were sharing some of your heart on this. And I think this is why I thought you were a grandfather. I don't know who it was, but you were sharing about your experience of this younger generation and how brilliant they are. And when I when I read that, I was kind of like taken aback for a bit, because I feel like all I ever hear and all the common conversation is like how um like entitled and how easy it is for this new generation to like have a Facebook, have an Instagram, have a phone, have social media. And that's kind of all I feel like I'd been consumed with in viewing, and even myself, like I'm 29. But hearing you speak on it this way, I'm like, wow, um, it's really interesting to see the possibility and potential that this generation has. And I really appreciate your perspective on this as a father. And I'm curious what has, outside of like you being aware of how that older generation and like the baby boomers were, is it like the experience of your sons? Is it the experience of, yeah, like I'm curious to hear more how you've gained that perspective of this generation.
I just observe. I'm very interested in people. I'm very interested
Yeah,
in people, and I'm not just interested in people like me. Um, and I
yeah,
have to be part of my job is to be, or my curiosity. I think I'm driven by curiosity, which is one of the reasons Da Vinci's my hero. And so I watch these younger people, and you have to realize they have, and I'm sure you do, that they have access to information at such an astounding volume that you used to
right.
have to go to college and you'd take a class and everybody in that class would get the same information. But
Yeah.
now, thanks to these social media tools like YouTube, you're getting world class information and thinking from the world's top thinkers on any topic. Like I told you, my son repairs his car. He learned on YouTube. Oh, he fixes German cars now because he took, like, normally you'd have to go to a school to learn that. And
Yeah.
they'll listen to these authors and thinkers and theologians and people who disagree with each other on podcasts, and their head is filled with that. It's not, they don't watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
They they gave up on cartoons and entertainment when it got political and there were 400 stations and everybody was trying to tell them what to think. So they're like, no,
Yeah.
I would like to think my own thoughts. And their curiosity is driving them to these tools that give them an accessibility and exposure that just we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And they're voraciously eating great thinking and talking about it with each other. My kids get together, and they all have different political perspectives, and one has a different religious perspective than the other two, and they all have significant others. And I see them with their friends. These kids are not talking about basketball games and sports and um, cool cars. They're talking
Mm-hmm.
about thinking and ideas and philosophy and what's morally correct and ethical. And then they're praying together, they're going to religious services together, they're cooking together, they get together and they'll build a deck on somebody's yard or help their friend. They'll do projects with each other that are very community
Mm-hmm.
driven, and you realize they're not living a me first life.
Mm-hmm.
They're living a we first life, and they're developing, re-bringing back these ideas of barter and exchange and knowledge exchange and value in each other's time and work in entertainment, in home improvement, in thinking. It's um it's very refreshing to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Can you,
maybe it's just the lens that I look at it, but I feel like I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I don't feel
yeah,
like I've seen it before.
no, I hear that. And I guess it's just because of, well, let me say this. I think that there is also, something to be said for enhancing that in them as a child and even as a young adult, because you do see that. Like I'm a firm believer in like you can get more of like what you see and what you choose to see. And but well, I guess where my curiosity then goes is if we can then start to um recognize and treat as though these things are true in this generation, like what more is possible for the older generations to be like, I actually want to learn from you. And I'm not a mom yet, but I tend to have this idea that like maybe parents have kids so the kids get to teach the parents so much. Like they end up being the teachers in so many ways because they bring about a different perspective an experience of life that, yeah, that was meant to happen. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you share. And it's really, it is really refreshing because, you know, in my understanding and awareness of what I kind of originally spoke on in those like discrepancies and who we were made to be, I do see that there are like, you know, endless opportunities for us to fill those gaps. One of them being that you spoke on really beautifully, which was community and having those like differing views and experiences of like, you know, kind of how you said your kids, like one is in a different religious stance than others, and then they still come together. I think that being a thing, like that's something that's so beautiful to me that I have such great reverence and respect for, is family at the end of the day being a place where we're going to go out and experience the world in different ways. And then at the end of the day, we're going to come together and we're going to cook together. Like
Yep.
that is really beautiful.
Yep. Well, and you said something there that I think is really insightful, really smart, that I don't hear a lot of people in your generation acknowledge or be aware of. And that is, and I didn't hear it from my parents' generation until I told them, and they went, "Oh yeah, I guess that's true." And this has to do with how this narcissism is getting kind of wrung out of us as a cultural species due to the impoverishment of the culture. And that is, I've learned more from being a parent than from having a parent. I wasn't a man until I had kids.
Mm,
I just didn't know it. And so when people say they don't want to have kids because of the world, I get that. And I mean, I know that I'm not going to denigrate anybody for saying it's expensive to have kids, or they don't want to because they have to give up too much of themselves. I hear that's a reality for people. And I don't think it's wrong. But I do think, or yet, yes, and I think that the acknowledgement that having a child is going to make you another person that you couldn't be if you hadn't had a child. Um, you might think that you have unconditional love with your significant other, but if you really think about it, you've got some conditions, and they could
for
violate
sure.
those conditions.
Yeah.
And you don't, like, I don't have unconditional, I mean, I don't have anything but unconditional love with my daughter, for instance.
Yeah.
So there's a male-female relationship in my life where I get, like, obviously there's no sexual overtone to the relationship, but with my
Right.
wife there is.
Right.
And there's no hierarchy. I mean, if anything, I'm the hierarchy, or I was for a while, and then I wanted to give that up. But as a dad, to get the unrelenting, worshipful love from a daughter is about the most rewarding thing that you can ever experience. And I imagine for mothers, it is from their sons. That mother son, father daughter dynamic is very special in that way. And I know that with my wife is a better friend to my daughter than I am, and they're kind of the girls' club at our house, and that's cool.
Yeah.
But they also have the cats versus dogs dynamic that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
with each other, and they like there's a tension, and they love it, and it's a healthy tension and all that. But there's a tension.
Yeah.
There is with my boys, because like I overheard my son one day. He was talking to another guy, and the kid said, "How did you learn how to do this?" And I can't remember if it was working on a car or working on a deck or building something. And his answer was, "Because I have a dad who's a man who taught me how to do it." And,
I
and there was a
love
lot in my
it.
generation of people that just call service people that don't fix things themselves. And it made me proud, and it made me laugh at the same time, because there's a competitiveness in that father-son relationship of, don't be a wuss, learn how to do this. And we're like, you're gonna get the tools, and you're gonna learn. We're gonna fix this. We're not gonna buy one.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's that dynamic with the male to male. So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's great. Oh, I love it so much. Well, okay, so you started to go in a direction a little bit that I want to go down of
sure.
a little bit what we were talking about before we started recording. In that um faithfulness in so we're
Oh
making a
yeah,
little pivot
just
here.
communication. Yeah.
Yeah, communication and Well, yeah. So Ron, you've been married for many years, so you're very much experienced in this experience of what it means to wake up every day with the same person and continue to love them. Which is what I've seen as a much struggled thing for most humans these days. I haven't lived a super long time to know what it was like before my time, but it seems as though to me, it seems as though it's harder than ever. Can we talk a little bit about what
Sure.
you've been able to learn? And yeah.
Yeah, all of those things. So one of the things you hear is, marriage is 50-50.
Mhm.
And again, we have a lot of memes that we've been programmed with in
Yeah.
our brains. And I'll tell you, marriage is not 50-50. That's ridiculous. If it were 50-50, then even the 50% that survive wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
It's 110, because sometimes somebody's going to do zero and you got to carry it. And that goes
Mhm.
both directions. And recognizing that every day you wake up with the same person. No, you don't actually. That person changes. And so, like, so you wake up sometimes, you go, who are you?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
what happened? And I mean, that's, again, I speak about myself when I speak about my wife in that tone, is we both have that experience. So I think that there's some fundamental things that you could, again, we are driven by our beliefs. If you don't believe something, you're not going to do it. So the things that I'm about to say are beliefs, and I would encourage you to be open to adopting the beliefs only if you want success in a relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
If if you do adopt these beliefs, your ability to succeed will increase. If you don't
Mhm.
like the beliefs and don't adopt them, you don't have to.
Mhm.
But one is, how can I make your life better? Has to be a mantra. Like, you have to, and I did not have that for years. How can I make her life better today? And she's learning, how can I make his life better today? And
Mhm.
we get into the relationship going, oh, I have expectations and you have expectations, and I hope they meet my expectations,
Mhm.
without thinking about the other person's expectations. So, how do I serve my spouse is critical.
Mhm.
Communication is critical. And we have this joke in our house: crystal clear, constant communication is the secret to a marriage. If you can remove constant, crystal clear communication, you have a chance at winning. You don't need to share every thought that you have all of the time. Because sometimes you are saying things that you will never get back, that don't need to be said.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
you have to understand, you're dealing with a human being. They're not your
Mhm.
punching bag. You don't get to say it all. You have
Mhm.
to have discernment as to what comes out of your mouth.
Mhm.
And that's a very difficult thing, particularly with the newly married. You're like, oh no, we're best friends. We say everything. No, you don't need to say everything. Some of the things that you say are horrible and damaging to people, and they're not well thought through.
Mhm.
So learning restraint is important. Then we get to this idea of faithfulness and communication. What we say, sometimes these words that we use don't mean the same thing to the other person.
Mhm.
So when I write ad copy for men, I'll use words like honor, commitment, loyalty, bravery. I would Have you ever heard a Kotex commercial with those words?
What Kotex? I don't know what that is.
Kotex tampon commercial. Like, you would never
Oh, no,
advertise
no,
to
no,
a
no, 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 no,
female.
no. That's so funny. I didn't even know what that would be, but no, no,
Yeah, you
definitely
would
not. No.
never use these words in a female commercial because they're not female words.
Right, 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 right.
But you wouldn't use nurturing in a male. Oh, your Porsche is very nurturing.
Yeah, yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, there's words,
Yeah.
there's entire lexicons that are devoted to the wiring of a female brain, which is running on diesel, and the wiring of a male brain that's running on high octane gasoline. And
Right.
we fooled ourselves into thinking, and particularly in today's culture, that you can just snap the parts off of one and put it on the other, and it becomes the other thing. It's like, no, the whole system. You can take a diesel engine and put it in a gasoline car, and the thing ain't gonna run.
Right. Yeah.
They are different things. And this constant lie that we're telling, oh, no, it's just for these couple of parts, we're the same thing. We are not the same thing. We coincidentally look like the same thing for the most part, but we are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring the word faithfulness to a wedding vow and you say, will you be faithful? What a woman hears is, we are not going to cheat on each other. You're not going to cheat on me. You're going to be loyal to me and faithful to me and only me. She's a gatherer. She needs protection to a certain degree. We've all seen the memes of the guys walking down the street. Is he walking on the right side or the left side, protecting her and her purse? Who sleeps closer to the door? It's his job in case someone breaks it. Like, we have these stories. We know that they're true.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that our job is to protect you as women. So faithful means this. You're going to be protective. You're going to be reliable. You're not going to cheat on me. To a man, it means two things. It does mean that. That's actually the secondary thing it means to him. Faithful means I'm going to be able to rely on you for sexual contact and affection. And faithful means old faithful to them. This thing that goes off every hour in Yellowstone Park, right? Like, there's a consistency and a reliability to the expectation of our intimacy and your affection and your admiration for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you over practice that in the premarital stage, and then you get to the wedding day and she goes, great, that piece of the theater's over now. And this happens in relationships, but we're married now. We don't have to do that as often. Why do you want it every day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's got high octane gasoline running through his system. He's full of testosterone in a system that is programmed to procreate every 72 hours.
Mm.
And a female is programmed to ovulate every 28 days.
Right.
And has a 36-hour window when she can make a baby.
Yep. Wild.
So her engine is running. She is on she's on a calendar and he's on a clock.
Right. Wow.
And so now she has the power. Because she does have the power. She gets to pick, because otherwise we're in a rapey culture and you're a creepy guy and you're being a bad man by being, and we get into that fight in the marriage.
Mm.
And now he's thinking, you're not being very faithful to me. Because now we go back to the root of what the lexicon means to us. So now temptation rears its ugly head. So this is a conversation you need to have before the altar.
Yeah.
Like, this is, before we commit our lives to each other, we have to understand, and we're oddly in a culture where we blast promiscuity and sexuality profanely through media and movies and TV. The stuff that we see on media now is just astonishing to me. And that, I don't think that makes me prudish. I'm just going, hey, looking over the last 50 years of media, stuff that you couldn't say, see, or do on television is now just, it's in my feed. It's on my phone and on every kid's phone. So we're raised in a hypersexualized environment, but not an educated one, where we understand the intimacy and the dynamics and the psychology that's associated with intimacy and its meaning. Mm-hmm. So we want it like fast food, but don't know it's going to kill us like fast food. There's the thinking portion is gone, and the desire thing is going off all of the time. And we have to teach our kids and ourselves the dynamics of what it means to be a sexual being in order to keep our relationships alive. And we have to come to some agreements and keep them and do our best. And within that, be empathetic to the other person and go, well, she did just have a baby. Maybe she needs 8 weeks off because she doesn't feel like herself, and she's got postpartum depression, and she's got all. And men don't think that.
Mhm.
That's the window when they cheat, always.
Oh,
Like
wow.
how many relationships have you discovered got broken between month 6 and baby 6 months? That window right there is a super dangerous window
Yeah,
because he's got raging testosterone and she is not. She's the baby factory's closed, man. Like,
right.
and you get all of this tension in the relationship. So it's very, there's natural volatility built into a relationship. So if you are getting into one, you need to anticipate that and have mature dialogue and come up with actual solutions that you both agree upon of how to maintain this particular situation when, and I don't mean just the pregnancy, but in the relationship when he wants more physical contact, she wants less. And I
Hmm.
do have friends who I've sat down and had this conversation with where it's reversed, where the woman is, she's hypersexual and the guy's not. And
Mm.
so that's another dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's the
Yeah,
same dynamic, but it needs to be addressed.
right. Yeah, it is. It's interesting you brought that up with that couple too, because it is, yeah, I mean, there is definitely circumstances where it is flipped too, which I find it to be very interesting that, it's like these things that are, like just biologically and organically true about the differences between us. And then at times, like in some ways, those roles kind of reverse. But at the end of the day, even if that's true, like still learning to have that, level of, I mean, honor, the word honor does come up for me, like honor and reverence for the other person in the midst of those seasons of life. Like, I mean, so I'm kind of young in that understanding of seasons of life, but to the awareness I have now, it's like that, what you were saying about you don't wake up to the same person every day. Um, my God, to have that long-term unwavering commitment when you don't really know how this evolution goes is a fascinating one. And that's what's been interesting for me is I feel as though there might be some level of hesitancy in humans now with the awareness of like, I don't know, like I'm thinking of like the fear of commitment and not knowing what happens 3 years down the road. And so, how do we be aware of the reality that we are going to continue evolving and changing and stick with that? Like, yeah, I mean, there's differing opinions here on that, like till death do us part. Like how do we keep that intact when there is no telling what occurs, for the other person and for ourselves as we grow and change every single day of our lives, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the kind of the irony in "till death do us part" is we know that statistically that only works out 47.8% of the time currently.
Yeah,
So
less than
it's not
half.
true.
Yeah,
So it's not
yeah,
till
yeah.
death do us part. It's till we can't stand each other or somebody's a jerk or someone. My mom used to say it takes two, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. It actually takes one jerk.
Mm.
Um, and so, and that's just a reality of some relationships. And like and we base this in guilt, shame, and fear, and lump that onto our religious book, whether it's the Torah, the Tanakh, the Bible, or the Quran, and we go, or a non-religious moral code that plenty of people are, I would say, agnostic or atheist that align with that. And Bible's full of divorces. It's also full of people with 5 wives.
Yeah, yes, it is. It is.
So I have trouble. And there's plenty of people that I know that should have been divorced that didn't get divorced. And I wish they had because it would have been so much better for their kids. And then there
Mhm.
were people where one of the persons just really screwed up and cheated on the other person, and you wish they'd have put it back together, but the other person just couldn't get over it.
Yeah.
And like to your point, there's a milieu. That's a gradient where there's so many grays on that thing.
Right.
It's none of my business.
Yeah, 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 totally.
From the outside, I go, people have their stories and their paths,
Mhm.
and it's got to be okay. And if I'm their friend, I support them. And, and we've had plenty of people in our lives get divorced. And they're like, whose side are you on? And I'm like, I'm not on anybody's side, but in almost every instant, one of the spouses picked us and the other one walked away from us. And we didn't end up with both of them being friends. And we didn't make the choice, they did.
Interesting.
And in some cases, it was like we were friends with a couple, like somebody got married to somebody, and then the friend left, and the other person was new to us stayed. So all of those dynamics change, and I don't. The thing that concerns me about, I guess, the younger generation in this topic is, again, it boils down to economics in a lot of ways. The world is so expensive. Getting a household together is expensive. People are under such money crunches, even when they're in a relationship. And people want their own stuff too, and they want to spend money. And then people are critical. Oh, I'm critical of my spouse spending money. And then, oh, all these relationships blow up. Why even start? I think that, again, we're in a spiritual paradigm moment, a dynamic. This thing's coming to a head, where I think that the devil's about to dance in the world, and we're going to have a breakthrough one way or the other. And I think it's going to be for the positive. But if I were the devil, would I want marriages? Would I want more of God's children on the earth? No, because he's having trouble winning those souls, because God wins most of the souls. He still does. So I don't want to make him more souls. Can I at least make him, can I slow down the production? If I was the devil, I would be partially in the job of temptation and partially in the job of let's destroy the idea of family so people don't even do it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. It is certainly a war on the family, 100%. Which is where, coming back to earlier in the conversation, talking about, the ways in which family comes together almost through like those learning and cultivating our individualistic gifts, talents, skills, and being able to utilize and like support one another in that way. That's a different part of the conversation. But I am curious, when you mention about like the spiritual nature of what's happening right now, and when you said like the devil's coming and there's going to be a breakthrough one way or another, I know we talked about playing our part in the way forward of knowing how to be useful, but I'm curious, Ron, spiritually, if you can speak to, things being where they are, where it seems like everything in the world is just crazy in many ways, but on a spiritual level, how it feels like and does it feel like perfect alignment for whatever God is doing? Can you speak to some of that? Because I know like what I'm thinking of as I'm saying that is I'm thinking of something you had written about all of the events lining up perfectly in the Bible. I know that's like a really much deeper rabbit hole, but I'm curious if you can just speak to that spiritual nature, how things look physically and spiritually, how it's, perfectly aligned.
Yeah. So one of the tricks of this current paradigm of where you live in the matrix here is you have a natural inclination to believe in past, present, and future. Because that's how you experience this place, as a past, present, and future. But if the Bible is the Bible, it's got a past, it's got these stories of the past, then it has this tribulation story, which I would say is the present. We're in that, and I have many reasons for believing that, but it also has a future. So it has a past, present, and future. But in John, what's written is, before this was the Word, and the Word was with me. Which means that this book was written prior to Adam and Eve. God wrote this book and had it, which is why it tells the past, present, and future. And God exists outside of time. God is eternal. So this is, I mean, this is kind of metaphysical. This is kind of hard to wrap your head around. It's Matrix stuff, but it was a screenplay. But it's a screenplay of a movie that's already been made in God's mind because God's outside of time. He can go to the end of the movie. So right now what's going on is we're in the theater. And Judy Garland's in The Wizard of Oz every time I see it. But Judy Garland's dead. But she's in The Wizard of Oz every time I see it. And I say that you're Judy Garland. Right now you're in the movie. And there's a very high probability that right now you're actually sitting in a theater next to God, and I'm on the other side of him, and you're leaning forward in the theater saying, this is the thing where you talked about the Wizard of Oz that day on the podcast. I love this part.
Oh my God.
So what I'm telling you is the reason the book is so accurate is because it's already happened. And we're in a movie that's already happened, and we don't realize that we're in that movie. Because God is all powerful and all knowing. So you go, oh, well, does that mean I don't have freedom of choice? It says, yes, you do have freedom of choice, but you have a God that knows you so intimately and loves you so deeply. He knows all the choices you're going to make because he understands the experiences you've had, which allows him to be very forgiving. So we tend to pray to God and think that God goes back to his job and we go back to our job. But God's job as the infinite being is being, what's God thinking about right now? Who's he thinking about and what's he doing? He's infinite. He has 100% of his attention and awareness and love focused on you. He's standing right behind you right now as the perfect parent as you're in this world touching all the hot stoves. And every time you touch something, you turn around and go, oh, that was a hot one. Can you help me? He's like, I was here the whole time. So that's our lack of understanding of where we are in the story. So yes, are we at a point of turmoil? Of course, if the story says we're at a point of turmoil, there's all of these factual things that have happened in the prophecies that have occurred. They're done, they're completed. I mean, and things from the newspaper in which you currently read, our lifetime, there's been a number of these things happen, including 9/11, including the Six-Day War in Israel in 1967. For me, you're younger than that, but the moving of the capital to Jerusalem in 1980, the world recognizing that in 2019 when Trump moved the consulate in Israel to Jerusalem and declared it the capital, and everybody, like, all of this stuff is biblically written. It's in the screenplay. So we're at the moment in the screenplay where it gets dicey. But the fact of the reason it's dicey is not because God's not controlling it. It's because we have freedom of choice and we're controlling it. So that's why I say the devil's about to take the stage. I think people say all the time, oh, the devil made me do it and tempted me. The devil hasn't been here. He walked off the earth when he tempted Christ, and Christ, he said, this whole land could be yours, I could give it to you. And Christ laughed at him and he said, it's already mine, be gone. And in that moment, Satan realized that the man he was talking to was God in the form of a man. And he had this man had no fear of the devil. And he said, no, I'm God. This is already mine. And he knew it was true. And he bolted. And it says that he's in his lair until this time, and he's going to come down upon the earth. He hasn't been here. So why is there suffering and hunger and all this poverty in the world? Because we allow it, not because God allows it. We could all have intervened. We could have ended world hunger and poverty and powerlessness, but we like war. It's very profitable. Yeah. We like making bad food. It's very profitable. We like pharmaceuticals. It's just all allows a pyramid scheme where very few people have a ton of power.
Right.
And we love that as a species. And then there's some of us who go, wait a minute, I don't love that. And we leave the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where we are. Yeah, we're at the crux of this story, but it's going to get better because he tells us you just got to read ahead. He tells us, yeah, it's going to get worse for a little while and it's going to get better, but you're in the theater, not just in the movie. You're already saved. You're already there. So when do we die? We all die at the same time. You hear these stories about people who die and cross over. I saw my parents and my grandparents. What they never tell you is I turned around because they're just so enamored with what they see. If you turn around, you're going to see your kids and your grandkids because that occurs outside of time. You die and you leave the paradigm of time. We all end up in that lobby at the same moment.
Oh gosh, there's so many places I want to ask. Oh gosh, there's just so many questions I want to ask. There's one I really want to ask you that comes to me a lot. It's a little bit off topic of my last question, but because we went there to the conversation of death,
Sure.
do you, and maybe this is complex, but do you, Ron, think then that in that leaving the realm of time, do we remember our loved ones? Like, do we know them as you were my brother in this life? You were my mother. Like, is that a real thing?
Sure. Really simple to me. You come here with a serial number, a divine serial number called your DNA. So you came out with a model number, human, a little more DNA, female,
Mhm.
brown hair, boom. You get long enough. Oh, Courtney,
Yeah.
you got a serial number called DNA, and you inherited it like a vessel from two people, mom and dad, who inherited it from two people. Go back 10 generations, you've got 2,058 people that gave you this DNA.
Yeah.
So you're the vessel. So you're definitely connected to all of them.
Right.
And then you have these kids, and the like an hourglass, it goes the other direction
Mm-hmm.
in the family tree. You're like in the middle of this weird hourglass, and we're all in the middle of this weird hourglass. And we know that when we take that hourglass back far enough, we're all connected.
Right.
That mankind really, it goes back again as the population shrinks over time, and you get back to Adam and Eve, and it's this weird
Yeah.
double helix of humanity, even as a number. So, why are we even here? What's the purpose of this life? So that you become you. You came here with this unique DNA code, and you have all of these experiences that help you become. Your purpose of your life is to become you, so that you can spend eternity there, recognizable. Because God could have just put you there. Why didn't He just put us in paradise? Well, if He had created us and put us all there, we would all have the exact same experience. So we'd be in a wonderful place with a father we didn't appreciate, in the best home ever, with all of these people that were saying, me, 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 but I look like all the siblings. We wouldn't recognize. The purpose here is to become different, so that when we go there, we recognize each other as different.
Yeah. Mm.
You're here to become you for an eternal life. And when we realize this is the school and the factory, and we get there, and we're like, I cannot believe I was so afraid of dying. And I spent my whole life worrying about dying. And everything I did was, will I be popular enough, or will I die? Will I have enough money, or will I die?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take my week and I'm going to divide it into 7 days, and I'm going to do the same things over and over and over and over again every week to prove to myself I'm never going to die. And then somebody I know dies, so I'm going to go, how did they die? They went on a motorcycle. And you go, oh, well, I'm not going to die. I didn't get on a motorcycle. I don't have a motorcycle. We disqualify. When someone dies, we don't say, oh my God. We go, how'd they die? That's our first question, is how?
Yeah.
So that we can disqualify ourselves from their death. Once we've done that, well, he ate horrible. He smoked. He was a drinker. We disqualify ourselves from their death, and then we go, oh, well, I sure am going to miss him. And we go back to our schedule.
Mm-hmm. It's
So yes, you are here with purpose, and the purpose is exactly what you're currently fulfilling, is becoming the perfect you.
yeah.
Mistakes and all,
Mm-hmm.
learning and all. Why does God let babies die? I don't know. Maybe in heaven we want babies. We love babies. Maybe when we get there, we go, wish we had some babies here. And He goes, hey, got a fresh batch.
Right. Oh my gosh. This is a very refreshing to hear. I think because sometimes these questions and asking and actually becoming curious about death and kind of wanting to remove the veil of the fear of it it can feel uncertain at times. And I appreciate getting to hear the way in which, like the way you shared it about sitting in the theater right now, while also being here, like that. I got chills when you shared that, and I can sense the truth there, and knowing that there is far greater purpose to this entirety of like our existence individually and collectively. And Ron, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but there is one other thing I wanted to touch on, and I don't know how deep we can go into it, but on a similar topic, I think it was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I had read I don't know if you would call it a book that you wrote, or it was, what is the name of it? It's The Champagne for Everyone.
Way forward is forward.
Oh, The Way Forward is Forward. And it has absolutely changed everything about the way I commune and communicate with God. So you had quite a radical experience. I don't know if you would be open to sharing briefly about how that experience may have changed how you experience God, and to some of the stuff you've just shared now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully by this part of our discussion, both you and this person whoever you are that's watching this and is like, this is really interesting stuff, is going, I'm hearing things that I haven't heard before in my life. And I'm hearing very complicated philosophical things explained in a very simple way that I can grasp. And I will tell you, that is intentional, and I am a radio. So what you're hearing is a radio station playing through a radio. And I am not the station nor the music. I am just the radio. So my purpose here as a radio is to speak these words. They're not my words. They're not my insights. They're revelations that are given to me on a continuing basis, because I was able to discover that God was sitting behind me the entire time. And I was unaware of that. And once I became aware that God was right there 100% of the time, and I realized he spoke this word into existence, and what kept him separate from me was the same thing that kept God separate from Jesus. And this is like a radical idea that a lot of Christianity would be like, what are you saying? And it's that if you think of God as a gigantic universal ball of Play-Doh, and when he created Jesus, he pulled off a little ball of Play-Doh and wadded it up, and it was just him. And he said, in order to empathize and fully have people get it, I'm going to put me there, but I'm going to use the same rules for me as them. So I'm going to disconnect myself from myself and walk the planet Earth as a man. And most Christian theologists say, no, he was God in the man form. Well, he is God in man form, but he made himself conform to the same rules. And we know this because when King Herod had John the Baptist executed and they went and told Jesus, he was surprised. He didn't know. He said, I'm upset. You need to leave. I need to go pray. So he went and mourned, was upset. And who'd he pray to? God. Right? Yeah. Himself. And he taught us how to pray. So that was proof that this divine being had to connect to the divinity through this path of the Holy Spirit. And you can have that. So I believe that is what I've done through grace. He's done that to me. All I had to do was say, I surrender. Will you speak to me? And I say, great, I am. Are you there? And he talks to me in a voice that's very familiar to me. Sounds very much like me. He goes, of course I'm here. I'm everywhere. Yeah. What have you been doing today? Well, I know what you've been doing. What have you been? I've been standing here watching you. That's what I've been doing. He's very comical and is like, what do you think I'm running? Well, with this hand, I'm running the universe, but with this other hand, I'm watching you, my friend. And so my point being, the Holy Spirit is like a cellular network. Holy person, holy body, holy water, WH. And that's why this planet's covered with water, is this great cellular network with which he reaches out and touches us and communicates with us. And you can hear him. And he goes, here's my stories. Here's how this really works. You guys are overcomplicating things. My friend Ron here I'm going to use him like a radio, like a piece of theater, like an actor. Ron, would you abdicate a part of your brain and your tonsils and your tongue and let me take over and tell these stories for a little bit? And I go, absolutely. And so he tells you these stories in a way that you can hear it, and it's truthful. But that is also not a special ability. He wants that. That is what divinity is. He wants that relationship with every single one of us. And when we realize that we have the ability to do that, that's when we recognize how much God loves us. Oh, I am that special. That yes, you are. You are that special. That's the relationship he wants. He doesn't want a church, a state, or a culture in between you and him. It is a direct relationship, the same relationship Christ had with him. That's what being a Christian is. Isn't living up to the moniker of I'm going to live to the perfection of Christ. It's I'm going to live to the perfection of godliness so that I can speak with my Creator on a daily basis, and I abdicate my desire. So I still have temptations, but to me, they're like dashboard lights in my car. It's just, oh, warning light. She sure is cute. Warning light. Move on. Oh, that looks delicious. Nope, warning light. Free cocaine? Nope, I don't want any of the free cocaine. They're just dash lights to me. I've never tried cocaine, but you know what I'm saying? It's like the world's full of this stuff, and it's very easy for me to deselect things that would normally have been temptations earlier in my life.
Wow.
And this is available to every single one of us.
100%.
I'm not living better than anybody. I'm living under complete surrender. So am I worried about my death? No, I'm already dead. I'm in a movie theater.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, yeah. I wonder, Ron, is that what you wrote that I read? Is it something that you keep to like friends and family? Is it available?
Anybody
Okay.
can have it. You can
Okay, I was gonna say I'll put the link to it and
yeah, there's a link on if you go to ronnielynch.com, there's a whole bunch of books that I wrote, and that's you know what, I'll send you a link if anybody wants it, they can get it directly from you.
okay.
There's some discussions in there about my family members, and so
Yeah.
I to not hurt their feelings,
Yeah, totally.
I don't want them reading it,
Right.
because they're just fragile people. I love them, but
Right.
there's stuff in there that says stuff that occurred in my life that
Fair.
they get very
Totally.
upset by the truth.
Yeah, fair. It's all good.
Yeah, but no,
No more needed to
but
be
you
said.
feel free to live. You have it right in digital form.
Yeah, I do.
Give it to anybody you like.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, and if you want to send me a link from your website, I'll put it in the
Sure.
in the description. Because you know, of all the things that we've discussed, I think they're all kind of grounded from that foundation in what you just spoke to, like are each of us having that ability to connect to God, as you like the great I am to you. However we get that connection, I do understand like that vital importance in our life and having that, so we don't just think we're like wandering around aimlessly, because I know I've had plenty of those days where that is
we feel like there's a separation, which encourages separation, and sin is a separation from God. But when you realize that the veil is, and it's just a veil between you and God, because He is right there, right now, all the time. And that to me, that's not a creepy thing. To me, that's a wonderful thing. It's like, oh my gosh, I am that cared for.
Yeah.
That you just go, pierce the veil. It's like, here I've been the whole time. I've been here the entire time. Well, what about this? You know, I discussed this in the book. Well, what about when I did bad things? That's sin, that's separation. I already know you're going to do it. So I just turn my head.
Yeah.
So I'm not with you when you do those things. Well, what is that? Well, I'm sorry I did those. I know, I forgive you. It's pretty easy for God to forgive you if He wasn't there. And He's not, We are programmed by all of our churches of he's making a list and he's checking it twice. And we turn that into an anagram. Santa and Satan are the same word, big red suit. And we use that anagram to teach kids to worship materialism and say, what did you get for Christmas instead of what did you give for Christmas?
Mm, mm. It's so fascinating. I mean, it's really everywhere, like right in front of us in ways that I think is easy to not really question or even consider that it's
Right in
all,
front of you. You're
yeah.
being psychologically trained the entire time to reject God and to worship
Mhm.
materialism and the tree of knowledge. And we walk around with this little phone with an apple with a bite out of it on the back. And when someone says something we don't agree with, we Google it, and Google is a symbol for infinity. We ask the infinite tree of man's knowledge what the answer is. And then we arrogantly argue with our friends because we're so knowledgeable, because we just Googled it on our
Yeah.
Apple.
Yeah, the fact checking life, it's with Google, it's something.
We're well, like we're so underneath the tree.
Right.
We just don't
Yeah.
even, we don't even see it. So there's all of these. Remember, the spiritual world, angels can't read; they sing. God created them to worship Him. He didn't create them to write books. He created men to write books and gave men language that could be written. Angels worked in symbols. Their world. So when you look at the ancient world and you see symbology, that's where symbology is for, and what it's from. It's for the angelic realm. It's not for the human realm. So we can't read their language and they can't read ours.
Mm,
So we're special beings
yeah.
and we have capabilities that he didn't give them. So when you think about that and you think of Lucifer or Satan being a fallen angel, is he jealous of you? Yes, he is. That's why
Mm,
he wants to take you down. He's taking God's kids away from him because he's jealous of all of them. They're favored.
mm, yeah.
They're favored over him. So therefore, you have the same power that Christ had when he said, I vanquish you.
Mm, yeah. Mm,
Thanks for
wow.
spending the time with me.
Thank you so much, Ron. This was really a gift. I just know all my female friends are really gonna love this. It's refreshing to get to hear the perspectives, um, yeah, from people who've really lived it and sought God in these ways that you have. It's quite a gift. And I wanted to ask, is there anything in particular that you're like I want to elevate the people that I get to have these conversations with. Is there anything that you're working on and putting out in the world that I can support through this?
Um, I just released a movie I directed about Bobby Kennedy, the real,
Oh,
the
oh,
real RFK
you
Junior.
did. Oh my gosh, I did not know this. I mean, I knew, okay, wow, wow.
So that'd be great if people went to see
Where's
WW.
that?
At the moment, it's at the real RFK Junior movie.com. And you can just go and put an email in and um,
The real RFK Junior.
the real RFK Junior movie.com.
Okay.
And then you put in your email and it sends you back a link to the movie for free. So
Oh
that's
my gosh.
interesting. And it's not a particularly political
Amazing.
film, it's more of a film about his life.
Oh,
But it's very
beautiful.
interesting as a political character in the world right now.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow.
And then, yeah, if you want to go to ronnielynch.com, and I have a whole variety of books and PDFs that I've written on a variety of topics from business to politics to uh, biblical prophecy,
Oh, yes, all friends will love that. Will love it. Yeah. Okay.
screenwriter's guide to tribulation is there, and that kind of gives you the anthology of what biblical prophecies have lined up since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Reformation of Israel in 1948, and
Wow.
gets you kind of right up to the present day newspaper of how all these things line up.
Okay. Wonderful. Oh, I haven't actually dove into that one yet. I just knew of its existence. So I look forward to, and thank you again for your time. It was really great to have you. And I know that there will be plenty of men and women who will get to just soak up the brilliance that was shared here today. So I
Oh,
appreciate
I
you.
appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity and the platform to talk about these things that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, it's wonderful to actually experience them. So thank you again, and we'll see you all
All right,
in the
we'll
next
talk
video.
soon.
Yes. Okay, stop recording. Thank you so much for joining in on this episode of Provisionary Love. I hope it blessed you and your home even abundantly more than it did me. And if you've been tuning in for a bit, I would love to know what you might be curious about. I get to discuss topics that go in such a wide array with the men and now women that I'm having these chats with, and this wind is so intense. So hopefully the sound is still coming through okay. But I do these completely unplanned. They're organic. Like it's interesting, like in podcast form, and I think most people do a lot of research and have a bunch of prepared questions. And I have like an intention. I go forward with intentionally choosing someone that I want to go in deeper into this broad provision topic with. But I do so in a way where like I have no idea what they're going to bring forward. It's different per guest, in the way that they can really hold the conversation and almost like take it in directions that I could have never planned for. And particularly, like with someone like Ron and Jesse, I knew that in chatting with the both of them, there's no way I could have planned for it. Like there's no way I could know what would be to come in having any conversation with them, just kind of how it goes. But that's the beauty of it to me. So with that being said, if there's something that's been touched on or that hasn't, that you're curious about, that you may, like if you're resonating with the guests that I bring on and you have like a desire to go deeper into certain topics, obviously these aren't like live discussions. Maybe I will create a format of that here soon at some point, but I am proposing this as an opportunity for you to ask your questions, so that even, even if I have certain guests on again, which I do intend to, that we can dive deeper into whatever arena you're curious about. Make yourself known. I would love to know who's tuning in. Thanks so much for being here. It's a blessing and an honor to share space and time with you on this really windy day. And I look forward to the next discussion and how it just might liberate us even more to discover what already lived inside of us. So from my heart to your home, sending my love.